A good umpire needs to have a thorough understanding of the laws of the game and their interpretations. But regardless of how good his knowledge, he won't be able to make the right decision unless he has a clear, uninterrupted view of play. The ability to get in position for a clear view is one of the most important skills of umpiring.
This unit will give you the basic principles for taking up the best position relative to the play. But first, let's define the terms we'll be using. The major axis is an imaginary line extending between the centre of the two goals, passing through the centre of the ground. The minor axis is an imaginary line between the two wings, passing through the centre of the ground at right angles to the major axis. Starting play is when a new passage of play is commenced, such as a centre bounce, a field bounce, or a boundary throw-in. Set play is the play following a mark or a free kick. General play is when the ball is loose on the ground and players are competing for possession. Initial position is the position taken by the field umpire in preparation for the next passage of play. Verbal control is when the umpire gives spoken instructions to a player or group of players. When side on to the contest, the umpire is side on to the players contesting the ball. When inside play, the umpire is positioned so that play is kept between him and the nearest boundary line. And the long side of the ground means that play is kept between the umpire and the nearest goals. In modern Australian football, with its fast movement of both ball and players and unexpected changes in the direction of play, umpires must continually adjust their position relative to play and players. As a general rule, the ideal position for an umpire is to be side on to the players contesting the ball. You should try to keep in this position at all times. There are three phases of football: starting play, set play, and general play. Starting play covers the three situations when a new passage of play commences. The first of these is the centre bounce. This is when the ball is bounced in the centre circle at the beginning of each quarter or after a goal is scored. If possible, you should approach the centre circle along the minor axis. The reason for this is that generally the ruckmen line up in their defensive halves of the ground, ready to contest the hit-out. After bouncing the ball, you should move quickly back along the minor axis towards the wing to a position about 20 to 25 metres from the play, keeping the contesting players under observation. This will place you side on to the contest, giving you a clear view. Two extra factors should be considered in choosing your direction of approach to the centre bounce. If possible, both the sun and the wind should be behind you, so that the sun does not get in your eyes and so that the wind blows the ball away from you rather than back over your head. The second starting play situation is the field bounce, that is, any bounce that occurs during general play. A field bounce should always be made so that your back is to the major axis or centre of the ground, making minor adjustments for the sun and or the wind as necessary. This allows you to stay inside play at all times. Immediately after bouncing the ball, move back quickly towards the major axis or the centre of the ground to a point about 20 to 25 metres from the contest. The third situation for starting play is the boundary throw-in. As soon as the ball goes out of bounds, move quickly to a position slightly forward of the expected point of contest and on the long side of the ground, about 10 or 15 metres away from the contest. As the ball is thrown in, the players move to contest the hit-out. You should adjust your position to be side on to the players contesting the hit-out, then move quickly to a position inside the next act of play. Let's recap on starting play situations. Approach the centre bounce along the minor axis. After the bounce, move back 20 to 25 metres along the minor axis. Keep the contesting players under observation. Remember, sun and wind behind you if possible when approaching the bounce. At a field bounce, keep your back to the major axis or centre of the ground. After the bounce, move backwards 20 to 25 metres towards the major axis or centre of the ground. Keep the contesting players under observation. Before a boundary throw-in, take an initial position slightly forward and 10 to 15 metres on the long side of the expected position of the contest for the ball. Be side-on at the time of contest. Move quickly after the contest to be inside the next act of play. And, as always, keep the contesting players under observation. The second phase of the game is called set play. When a set play is awarded, play generally stops, giving the umpire time to take up the best position for the next act of play. There are 4 set play situations that occur regularly. These are a mark or free kick around the ground, a kick-in after a behind has been scored, a deliberate shot at goal which is likely to score, and finally, a kick from deep in the defensive zone. Let's look at each of these in more detail. In the around-the-ground situations, you should be about halfway between the player on the mark and where you expect the kick to finish, at an angle of 45 degrees to the line of the kick. This allows you to clearly see both the player with the ball and the player on the mark and have verbal control over them, and at the same time to observe the players waiting to receive the kick. After the kick, run to a side-on position. When there's a kick-in from a behind, take up your position about 25 metres from the goal square and on the major axis. From here, you can see whether the kick is correctly taken within the square and at the same time have verbal control of players around the goal square. This position also allows you to watch the players waiting to receive the kick. If a player kicks in from the side of the goal square, move across to that side to a position in line with the goal square sideline and the goal post. After the kick, move to a position side on to the contest about 20 to 25 metres inside the play. Where a player is taking a set kick at goal and is likely to score, you should first position the player on the mark, then position the player with the ball on the correct line of the kick. You then back away from the mark at an angle of 45 degrees to a position about halfway between the player on the mark and the goal. From here, you can clearly observe both the player with the ball and the player on the mark and retain verbal control of both. You can also watch players at the expected destination of the kick. After the kick, if the ball falls short of goal, run to a position 20 to 25 metres side on to the contest. In the event of a score, move to a point close to the major axis to give the all clear to the goal umpire. Prior to a kick from deep in defence, you should first position the player on the mark and the player with the ball on the correct line of the kick, then back away to a position halfway between the player on the mark and the expected destination of the kick at an angle of 45 degrees to the expected line of the kick. This is the best possible position from which to control both players and to clearly see players at the point where you expect the kick to finish. After the kick, run to a position side-on to the contest for the ball. Now let's recap this section on set play. In around-the-ground situations, take up an initial position halfway between the player on the mark and the expected destination of the kick at an angle of 45 degrees to the line of the kick. After the kick is taken, move side-on to the next act of play as it develops. At a kick-in from a behind, first take up a position on the major axis 25 metres from the front line of the goal square. After the kick, move side-on to the next act of play. If the player kicks in from the side of the goal square, take a position in line with the goal square sideline on the side from which the player kicks. Before a set kick at goal, position the player on the mark and the player with the ball, then take up a position halfway between the player on the mark and the goal at an angle of 45 degrees from the line of the kick. If the kick falls short, run to a position 20 to 25 metres side on to the contest for the ball. In the event of a score, move close to the major axis to give the all clear. Before a set kick from deep in defence, position the player with the ball and the player on the mark. Take a position halfway between the player on the mark and the expected destination of the kick, 45 degrees to the line of the kick. After the kick, run side on to the contest for the ball. The third phase of the game, general play, is a real test of your positioning skills because of the rapid and often unexpected changes in the direction of play. You need to react quickly to current play and anticipate the next act of play. There are two most important factors to help you read a game. They are to keep inside play 20 to 25 metres away and side on to the contest, and to keep on the long side of the play. There are 4 types of general play that occur in games. These are around the ground, play heading towards the boundary, play heading towards the goal, and the umpire level with or behind the player who has kicked the ball. In general play around the ground, you should always be positioned about 20 to 25 metres from each contest, inside play and on the long side of the ground. This gives you a clear view of the contesting players and in the best position for the next act of play. When play heads towards the boundary line, again you should be side on to the contest on the long side of the ground and about 20 to 25 metres inside the boundary line. Similarly, when play heads towards goal, you should move to a side-on position and inside of play, remaining 25 to 30 metres from the goal, behind line or boundary line as appropriate. When you are level with or behind the player who has kicked the ball, look at the players at the expected destination of the kick, watch their direction of movement and quickly take up a position side on to the contest. So, in summary, during all aspects of general play, you need to be positioned about 20 to 25 metres from play, inside play and on the long side of the ground. This gives you a clear view of the contesting players and allows you to move to the best position for the following act of play.
Remember, positioning is the key to successful umpiring. Every successful umpire has mastered the skill of correct positioning.